Okay, my name is Yitzchak Korn, and it's a zchus to participate in the Shema B'Chala project. I feel, even though I wasn't zocha really to know Sarah too well, I feel very connected. It goes way back when I was in the bunk with Shalom Lamb in Shtilin, back in the 1970s, and we're very close friends with Josh and Rivki Lamb. My wife, Zechariah Bracha, was very close friends with Rivki. And of course, I was zocha to learn under Rabbi Lamb in the Simon Smicha in the yeshiva, and I overlapped a bit with Rabbi Drash in YU. And above all, I had the pleasure of spending the year in the Tivaria with Sam Drash, and we will now, with no further ado, go on to the Perek. Our Perek for today is Perek Kuf Mem in Tehillim. And the theme is perhaps a bit unpleasant. It talks about evil and emphasizes evil. We see David HaMelech, who we know suffered from many adversaries and many enemies throughout his life. We have Shaul, we have Avshalom, and the Perek really, we see David HaMelech beseeching and calling out to Hashem to save him from the evil. We see, for example, how David HaMelech talks about these bad people, evil people, who sharpen their tongue with venom under their lips. They contrive against me. The arrogant have set traps to try to catch me. David HaMelech talks about Hashem striking out, let the mischief of their own lips bury them. Let not the slanderous man be established. Finally, at the end of the Perek, David HaMelech tells us that the tzaddikim will give thanks to your name to Hashem, and the upright will dwell in Hashem's presence. We see in the Perek, if we notice, that it's not really just evil that David HaMelech is railing against, but his evil speech. Now, as I'm filming this, although you are watching after Tisha B'Av, now we're in the midst of the 9 days, and we know how much we've suffered from Lashon Hara and evil speech leading up to the destruction. Rav Hirsch talks about the misuse of the gift of speech, and he tells us that the evil people throughout the generations, the misuse of this gift of speech is the first and most effective tool of all evil. And David HaMelech certainly suffered from it. The Radak, in the beginning of the Perek, tells us specifically that David may have been referring to the Zipim, who snitched on David and was running away, and Doeg. Who is this Doeg? Secondly, I'd like to ask, why would we emphasize the evil of Doeg, certainly, we'll see, secondary to Shaul, who was the primary adversary and pursuer of David? Well, we know that when David, Shmuel Aleph, the Navi tells us that Doeg was present when David HaMelech was running away. He had a small group of men, no food, no ammunition, no anything, and he ran to Achimelech, where the Mishkan was. Achimelech was the Kohen. Achimelech looks at David and he says, "Why are you by yourself?" He told me he's on a special mission from Shaul. I have nothing to eat. He had no regular food, and he gave him lechem apanim to eat, and he gave him a special sword that David got from, actually, when he conquered Goliath, and that's what gave David HaMelech food, and he was off on his way. Later on, Doeg went and told Shaul, do you know what happened? When David was running away from you, he ran to Achimelech. Achimelech is apparently an accessory to this rebellion against you. And what happened then was one of the great tragedies, really, of Shaul, really of Jewish history, is that Shaul gave the order to kill out the whole city of Novi Yeruchalayim. Interestingly, nobody wanted to do it except for Doeg himself. We see the severity of Lashon Hara. When Rambam wants to emphasize the severity of Lashon Hara, he tells us a terrible sin, Avon Gadol. Look what happened to Doeg. Look what happened to this person. Interestingly, the Mishnah in the Masechet Eruvin teaches us that ha'omer b'fiv, someone who speaks, who sins with his mouth, chamor min ha'oseh ma'aseh, is often worse than the person who does the deed himself. So we see that David HaMelech, yes, Shaul was the one pursuing him, but who really, under the scene, back of the scene, caused the most damage? It was Doeg. There's a very telling medrash that talks and says as follows. And the medrash tells us, listen, when a person has a good friend, and the friend is on the edge of a pit, what is he going to do? Obviously, the place of a friend is to save the person from falling in. What do you do if you're a real rotten person, a real rotten friend? You push him in, push him over the edge. Shaul was angry. Shaul was jealous. Okay. Doeg, he was advisor. Doeg, who taught by the Gemara and the Midrashim, was a very scholarly person. He was in Sanhedrin. He should have saved Shaul. He could have brought him back, could have brought him to his senses. We see there were some times, even during the pursuit of Shaul, where he calmed down and he said to David at one point, David, is that you, my son David? Instead of doing that, what Doeg did was push him over the edge. Instead of calming him down and getting him to forgive David, or even getting him to think, which was true, that Achimelech only gave David the food because he thought he was on a mission from Shaul. Instead of doing it, he pushed him over the edge. He got Shaul involved in the evil. Interestingly, David HaMelech in this Perek is emphasizing the slanderer, the Lashon Hara, worse than the person who really was pursuing him. Perhaps to conclude our short limud of this Perek is a comment that Rav Hirsch makes in this Perek regarding David HaMelech, that I think is relevant to this whole beautiful project. And that's as follows. We know that David HaMelech didn't necessarily understand and comprehend why he was being pursued, especially at this point in his life, and do anything wrong. He was such a dedicated servant to King Shaul. Still, he accepted the suffering. And Rav Hirsch says, and I'll read a couple of lines, the most solemn decree of Elokim. He's going on the Psukim, Pasuk Zayin and Chet. Amarti L'Hashem Eli Yatza, Hazin Hashem Chol Tzapnunai, Elokim Hashem Oz Yeshuati. The most solemn decree of Elokim, suffering, which with Midat Hadin, the suffering ordained by God, is simply another demonstration of His, of Kadosh Baruch Hu's, constant love, and that God, who thus shows His mercy by testing him with trouble and sorrow, certainly David HaMelech was tested, and we are unfortunately tested in many ways in our lives. Hashem is my master, to whose service we belong with every fiber of our being. David HaMelech's response to this specific suffering, and perhaps this is our guide to the suffering that we have in our lives, is turning to Kadosh Baruch Hu. We're not going to understand in this world, but we know that Kadosh Baruch Hu, what happens to us is ordained by God. Somehow everything is a demonstration of His, Kadosh Baruch Hu's constant love, and Bezrat Hashem will all be zoch and merit to serve Him with every fiber of our being. Shalom, shalom.